we conclude our Genesis story, we'll hit up Exodus on Tuesday. Genesis kind of concludes with Israel, that is Jacob, okay, who's now named Israel, and taken all of his grandchildren and great-grandchildren and taken them down to Egypt because of the famine. And we're kind of left at the end here of our first reading, just a very moving reunion of Jacob seeing his son Joseph for the first time since he disappeared years ago. Jacob's so ecstatic, he's like, I can die now, knowing that I got to see Joseph again. And that might be Joseph right now. So this is where God's calling. All right. I get it too. I get all my text messages like right now when everybody knows I'm at Mass. It's funny how all that works out. So sometimes if you hear a ding from my iPad, that's somebody sending a text message. But anyways, I want to just kind of sum up Genesis and kind of put a bow on it and get ourselves ready for Exodus. And it's kind of hard to do because, this book is 50 chapters long, so there's just so much. But we have to start at Genesis chapter 3 with the fall of Adam and Eve, okay? And they're removed from the garden. The garden is where they walked with God. There was a communion, a relationship established with God that has now been lost and broken, okay? Because through their own choice, Adam and Eve decided it was more interesting to live a life, at least they thought, live a life radically separated from God, where they kind of live on their own and do what they want and provide for themselves, that was more enticing to them for whatever reason than continue to walk in fellowship with God. And we can point at them and say, how can you be so stupid? But as one that goes to confession myself, one who struggles with sin, it makes total sense because, sin is this idea of like, I want to live life the way I want to. I want to seek my own and reach out for my own comforts. And these own comforts generally don't pertain to God. They're almost an exclusion of God. We kind of have this battle within ourselves of trying to live with God and relationship with God and trying to live radically on our own, providing for our own needs, that type of mentality. A struggle that's just going to continue on through Genesis. We see when we get to Genesis 12 with the call of Abraham that even though Adam and Eve are out of the garden, God always has a plan to bring them back. And that story is not just the Jewish people's story, it's our own story. Because as God meets with Abraham and establishes those 3 promises that become covenants, okay, the covenant of land and nation, okay, so put those 2 together. God will show Abraham a great land, but from that land there will be a great nation, okay, so that's the one promise that becomes a covenant in Genesis 15 with the slaughter of the calf, okay. And Genesis 17 is the circumcision covenant, which relates to the promise of descendants and making Abraham's name great. Okay, they're the same thing. How's Abraham's name going to be great? Well, it's going to be great through his descendants. Okay, so that promise became a covenant in chapter 17, and then 22, the worldwide blessing. Okay, that worldwide blessing, okay, that number 3 promise and covenant, that's why it becomes our story. As you read to St. Paul, especially, St. Paul trying to convince his fellow Jewish brethren that Christ is the fulfillment, not replacing it, not getting rid of it, not abandoning the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures, the story of Abraham, but Christ is the fulfillment. Why? Well, because that's the answer. Okay, that's God delivering on that 3rd promise and covenant of the worldwide blessing. That not only through the Jewish people and through the descendants of Abraham, all the world's going to be blessed. And we're going to see how that plays out. And I'm going to point that out as we move through the text of Exodus and so forth and further on. We see through Genesis how all this is starting to come to fruition. They have the land. They start having the descendants with Isaac and Jacob, and now the 12 sons of Jacob. How God had those promises are all being fulfilled. But as we see in the first reading, the story ends with Jacob and all of his family and all the promises of God being moved down to Egypt, okay, to a foreign land. And the fact that God tells Jacob, don't be afraid to go down to Egypt. Jacob must be having some concerns like, well, wait a second, like, God, your promise was that I'm right here. But now I have to go down there. And like the story of Joseph that we heard in yesterday's first reading, where Joseph tells his brothers, look, you thought you were doing evil, but God was going to make good out of this. The fact that they sold him to Egypt. It was how their lives were being saved, okay, through their evil action. We're going to see how they're going to go down to Egypt, and we're going to see how God is going to make something good out of this, okay? And that's where I'm going to leave you off, because then that will beautifully lead us into the book of Exodus, which we will see next week. May God bless you.